All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of the Aquatic Life Conference. It's our 5th annual Aquatic Life Conference. I'm Sofika Kosteniuk, Managing Director at Aquatic Life Institute. Absolutely thrilled to be joining you again today. Just as a quick recap of what we covered yesterday, we had a fantastic, really insightful keynote address from world-renowned fisheries expert, Dr. Daniel Pauly. And then we dove into a few sessions, including reducing the number of aquatic animals in the global food system, as well as refining the conditions in which aquatic animals are grown as well as caught. There was some great conversation amongst our panelists and then some fantastic questions from the audience. So we encourage lots of participation again today. And today's themes will be replace and refuse as our final theme. And again, please type your questions into the Q&A boxes. We'll try to address them as much as possible. And all of the sessions are being recorded. So please stay tuned for the follow-up recordings and share them widely, as well as refer to them for your own purposes. So I just wanted to welcome you again on behalf of Aquatic Life Institute and wish you a fantastic conference. I'm going to hand it off to Hira Jaleel, one of our incredible board members. We're so thrilled to have her guiding the organization and leading this first session today. Enjoy.
Thank you, Sofika. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Aquatic Life Conference. Like Sofika mentioned, I'm Hira Jaleel. I'm an animal law professor and also a member of the board here at Aquatic Life Institute. We had a really wonderful lineup of sessions and speakers yesterday, and I'm very excited to kick us off today with another wonderful session. So this session is titled Replace, and we will discuss sustainable plant-based and cell-based alternatives in the seafood industry to mitigate the pressures on our current food system. Before we kick off, some housekeeping reminders for attendees. The audience are muted upon entry and your cameras will be off. Please turn your cameras off. Please post your questions in the Q&A box at the end of the session or during the session, and we'll answer them at the end. Every session is being recorded and will be made available after the conference, as Sofika mentioned. We expect respectful and productive discussions, and we have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment and discrimination of any kind. In terms of the length of the session, it's 1 hour, 25 minutes long, and we have 4 panelists. And I'd like to start by introducing our fantastic panelists for today. Robin Simsa, who is the CEO of Revo Foods. Samantha Derrick, Executive Director and Founder, Plant Futures Initiative. Dr. Rick Barrows, Chief Scientific Officer, Future of Fish Feed, F3, and Taylor Quinn, Executive Director, Tailored Food. And without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Robin to kick the panel off.
Thanks very much for the great introduction, Hira, and thanks also for the invitation. I think we all love the ocean here, I hope at least, and would love to kick it off by explaining a little bit about what we hope to achieve at Revo Foods with finding a new solution so that maybe a bit less, or a bit more fish can actually stay in the ocean. Can you see the presentation well? Can you hear me well? Starting it now?
Yes.
Perfect. So a little intro about us, what we do at Revo Foods. Maybe we're a company based in Austria, so a country without any direct sea access. So you could say we're not even directly affected from it, but I think that's a poor thinking, but actually like what happens in the ocean affects all of us. And we are actually working on a new food technology solution, a new food texturization technology, as we say it, in order to actually create seafood products, food products, without the need to take seafood out of the ocean, and that can hopefully appeal to a new generation of consumers that really look for a lot of, let's say, quality and similarities of these alternatives to the conventional seafood that they are used to. We're based in Vienna, Austria. We have now about 45 actually team members. We're a relatively small startup. We received a bit more than 7 million euro so far in our history, and also have some patents. And because we focus a lot on our technical development, because at the end, like, I don't need to tell this here, like most of you heard a lot about it, all of us know it basically, like fishing and aquaculture, a lot of problems out there, a lot of problems with sustainability, etc. And just it's time to think if this is really the smartest system that we can have to provide people with what they love. And what they love is good tasting, healthy proteins, we believe. But so far, if you want to have good, tasty, healthy proteins, which maybe are similar in taste, like some of the seafood that you already love, there are very little alternatives out there available. However, also just from an industry perspective, it's really time to start thinking about, isn't it time to have some more alternatives there? Because actually the seafood consumption in Germany, this is something that I find very interesting. In kilogram per capita, in 1970, it was about 11 kilogram per capita, so per person. So right now, in this day and age, it's 11.2 kilogram per capita. So it doesn't grow. It's basically a stagnating market. And I mean, it depends a bit on the species of fish, on the exact type of seafood. But overall, there's not a lot of growth in countries like Germany. So you would need to think as this industry point, because often it's a fight against like sustainability, against industry interest, I feel, and it doesn't need to be this way. But here we can clearly see that we have a stagnating industry that grows in price, that has a high inflation susceptibility. So it is in the own interest of this industry to renew itself and find new solutions to reach a new target audience in the end. Easier said than done, because there's some alternatives out there yet, but many of them are not yet that convincing for most mainstream consumers. You can see that here, for instance, this here is a plant-based salmon fillet alternative that is on sale in European supermarkets, for instance. And this wouldn't fool anyone. You can clearly see this is not something that a person that says, I love salmon fillets, for instance, would like to buy. It's just, it lacks many properties. And our approach here as Revo Foods was that we need a new type of process technology in order to improve the overall quality of these types of products. And this is where I actually did a PhD in this subject with 3D printing, which sounds crazy enough for food, but where I saw that by integrating fat into a protein fiber mass, it leads to incredible new behaviors. And what I mean by this, you see this here, for example, you can really fully define the final texture of a product, which is super important if you want to recreate the behavior of something like a salmon fillet. For example, this flakiness, for instance, because what happens here is that with the fat integration, fat has a lower melting point, and it kind of leads to a bit of a separation with the protein fibers, but not so much that it all leaks out or gets removed. No, it's integrated within the protein, so it just loosens up, but it's still there. This is more or less very similar to what happens in animal meat of this type. And this is a completely new process that couldn't be established at industrial levels before. And one of the very nice thing compared to some other processes that are out there, it works at low temperature. Normally, this are processes that work at 100 degrees, 120 degrees Celsius, much more in Fahrenheit, and where you lose a lot of nutrients, a lot of the micronutrients, for instance. When you work at lower temperature, usually, not always, but usually it is better for the nutrition of the product. And yeah, we base this salmon fillet alternative that we call the fillet on a very exciting new ingredient, which is mycoprotein. Mycoprotein or mycelium is based from fermented mushroom, basically. And it is one of the most nutritious and sustainable protein sources on the planet. It grows in biomass every 5 hours. That's extremely fast with very low nutrient requirements. It has all the essential amino acids present, so it gives the body everything it needs. It has a higher bioavailability than beef, which is crazy for me still. Like, the body can take it better than beef. Like, this is really a superfood in our opinion. And we paired it also with microalgae oils, which of course is the original source of all omega-3 fatty acids that are healthy for us to consume. Yeah, so basically the nutritional profile is very, very similar compared to a conventional salmon fillet. So no need to miss out on anything on this front. And here we can show you a bit of how this production works in an industrial setting. Basically, you have multiple of these machines connected together with conveyor belt systems. And this is how you really get to scale and to speed, because only when you work with many nozzles, multi-production systems, this is when you get to very exciting volumes. And let's not forget that salmon from aquaculture farms takes 18 to 24 months to be grown and harvested. Yeah, I'm very excited to announce that actually next week, less than 1 week, we will ship our first shipment to the biggest supermarket in Austria of this type of product. So that's a very cool development, I think, where I hope it has some effect on, yeah, hopefully ocean sustainability. Here you can see how the product looks like, and here you can also see what I meant before when I said this fat integration into the product, which really leads to this flaky behavior and this like very nice tender mouthfeel that just cannot be recreated with other technologies of food tech right now, while still being at a low temperature and quite low processed. And here, like, we also made a little video of how that actually looks like when you see the production in real. Here in a lab scale setting, but it's quite similar in a production scale setting. In the future, this technology is also very interesting for applications such as personalized nutrition, for instance, where you can really fine-tune the nutrients that you want, because everybody is different and everybody has different requirements. And this is not right now for sure, but in the next 5 to 10 years, I think this will become a very interesting field of food science. Yeah, last year we released the first limited edition of this, and then we published this, and we got a bunch of hatred. Like, I don't know, BBC called us because the Scottish salmon industry says like, oh, this is not allowed. Like, yeah, so it's a bit polarizing, the whole issue of alternative protein, I think, and I hope it doesn't need to go forward this way, that it's so politicized, because at the end, I don't know, in this case, it's a really good protein source. It's a really like healthy product. Like, it has a right to exist there, I think, and I hope that this confrontation with like many seafood producers are often like, hey, like, you shouldn't do this, like that it can be a bit less like this and a bit more cooperative, and see how we can all like grow and like, yeah, make some good things happening. Yeah, here you see some other product developments that we have. This is a product we released in March, for instance, the Kraken, which is a octopus inspired product, or a whitefish fillet. We have, so yeah, quite some more good things to come. And right now, actually, we inaugurated our first big line production facility, where you saw a render video before. And yeah, next week we send out first products of the fillet to supermarkets. I hope that people love it, and hopefully we're in the US and Canada and other parts of the world as well soon, because I think it needs much more solutions like this. I hope at least we can be part of the solution for this big problem that we have with ocean sustainability. Yeah, and with this, thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Robin, for kicking us off. And the presentation was absolutely fantastic. And there's so much potential definitely in this technology. It was great to hear about it. And also congrats on launching in Austria and Germany. That's fantastic news. And we're clearly here at a very momentous time. And so without any further ado, I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Samantha, if you'd like to take over.
Sure, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. One moment. Great. Can you all see that okay? Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Robin, and thank you, Aquatic Life Conference. Amazing group and an organization. Really excited about the work that you're doing and excited to be here. My name is Samantha Derrick. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Plant Futures Initiative. I'm originally from Florida, but I've lived in Mexico City the last 2 years. And Plant Futures is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and an academic course that started out of UC Berkeley a few years ago. And we are equipping students to become the next generation of ethical leaders, systems thinkers, and effective advocates for a plant-centric future for our planet, for people, and for animals. And today I'll be discussing the role of education and next generation workforce development in increasing access to plant-based alternatives for seafood. I also have a personal connection to this topic. Growing up in Melbourne, Florida, I went to the beach almost daily, and I also lived in Hawaii for a little while. So my love for the ocean and aquatic life is something very close to my heart. I also learned about factory farming when I was 12 years old and decided to stop eating animals. At first, it was just farmed land animals, and I kept eating seafood because I was convinced that seafood was sustainable. And it took me, I think, about 1 week to realize that seafood is not actually sustainable, and almost immediately adopted a vegan diet and eliminated all animals from my diet. And to this day, 20 years later, I can say it's still one of the best decisions I've made in my life. To the next slide. So our mission at Plant Futures is to accelerate the transition to a plant-centric food system. And of course, there's a lot of data to back plant-centered food diets, which I won't get too deep into today because I know a lot of you are familiar with it already. But just a very quick overview, we know from Project Drawdown that food systems are one of the most important leverage points to address climate change. Animal ag is, of course, destroying the planet, and we include seafood and industrialized fishing in our program, and a big focus on that. As in my own experience, we've seen in our student network that a lot share the misconception that seafood is somehow more sustainable than land animals when it's really not. Industrial fishing is a massive global public health issue that's often overlooked. Overfishing and food security, depletion of that leads to reduced availability for contamination and toxins in seafood, including mercury, plastics, and industrial waste, antibiotics and chemicals in aquaculture leading to antibiotic resistance, spread and disease of seafood-borne pathogens. Industrial fishing can contribute to the spread of disease, and labor exploitation and human rights issues. Workers in the field experience very severe health impacts, and they endure very harsh conditions for little or no pay, oftentimes. Oh, sorry, going back. So why plants? Replacing seafood with alternatives, including plant-based alternatives, on the other hand, eliminates the need for destructive fishing practices, and by choosing plant-centered seafood, consumers can support ocean preservation, reduce their carbon footprint, and improve public health. So going a little bit more into our story at Plant Futures and why this started with my own personal experience. I went to UC Berkeley to get my Master's of Public Health about 4 years ago. I studied public health nutrition, and I wanted to work in the plant-based food space, only to find out that there was a total lack of discussion and support within the public health program around animal agriculture and plant-centered eating. It was very shocking to me. They spoke about almost every public health issue except animal agriculture, no conversation around industrial fishing, which was shocking to me. So very frustrated, and ended up developing a curriculum and a program that I would have wanted for myself when I started at UC Berkeley. So we launched the program about 4 years ago, and now we have a global network of 75 universities across the world who are part of our program. And why Plant Futures? If we're not equipping the next generation of students and young professionals, we're not going to have the talent that we need to transform our food system and to protect our oceans. So that's what our program focuses on. We focus on plant-centered food education, career paths, diet shifts, and food procurement on campuses as a sustainable solution to reduce seafood in our diets and animals, ultimately to alleviate the environmental and public health challenges associated with animal agriculture and industrial fishing. Our curriculum, which I'll get to in a little bit, also includes a on Oceans and Seafood by Tessa Gonzalez from Aquaculture Institute, who is here with us today, and I will share more about that in just a little bit. One of the things that we focus on at Plant Futures is normalizing plant-centered eating on campuses and in younger generations. As I mentioned, we have 75 universities across the world, mostly in the US, but we are starting to expand globally to Latin America, Europe, and Asia. What we're doing is making plant-centered eating fun, appealing, inclusive, and accessible. For example, students are having plant-based food tailgates at football games in spaces where you wouldn't normally expect to see plant-based food being available. So we're really normalizing the culture, making it fun, making it appealing, really building community around it. And we also have a curriculum, as I mentioned, that's open to students from multidisciplinary backgrounds. All academic backgrounds are able to join all levels of education. And finally, we're working on food procurement initiatives with dining halls to make plant-based food alternatives more accessible on campuses, removing the need for animals, including seafood, in dining halls. So here are just some examples of what our students are up to on different campuses across the US. One exciting data point to share is that most of our students are not vegan or vegetarian. They identify as plant curious or flexitarian, and that's exactly the target audience we want to reach. We don't just want to reach vegans and vegetarians because we don't think we will have the broader impact that we need to have to truly transform the food system. And a little bit more about our curriculum. We offer 2 different courses, including a new course that was accredited at UC Berkeley. And with the support of the University of California, we're going to be launching our course across all 9 UC campuses in January. This course is going to cover everything from farming and animal agriculture to public health, innovation, culinary literacy, media, and industrialized fishing module from the Aquatic Life Institute, just to name a few, showing students where they can contribute their specific skill sets and academic backgrounds to plant-centered food systems. And besides educating students and introducing them to these topics, the idea is to support students with building career paths, and that's where our second course comes in. The Plant Futures Challenge Lab. This is our applied learning course. This is offered for academic credit at UC Berkeley and UCLA, where we focus on professional development. Students develop skill sets working directly with companies and organizations in the plant-centered food space. We pair on multidisciplinary teams, and they solve a real challenge that the company is facing. We really see it as a win-win. Students are getting applied learning experience, and companies are connecting to the next generation of talent. They're working with a team of brilliant, passionate students, and many of them are actually offered employment opportunities coming out of our Challenge Lab course. So we're really building the talent pipeline between academia and the industry. These are just some of the companies that we've worked with, and I wanted to point out Foods. We are looking to integrate more alternative seafood and plant-based seafood in our lab as our program continues to grow. So a little bit more about the Finless Food Project, just to give you an example. They are a cultivated seafood company for those of you who are not familiar with them. And while the majority of our focus is on plant-based products, we do include some cell culture companies because there is a growing student interest in this field, and we often respond to students' interests and needs as long as they align with the values of our program, which include retail system, of course, and consumer behavior to increase brand engagement and to conduct a market analysis of their products. And what is interesting in the Challenge Lab is that we see similar challenges across different startups in the ecosystem. And for example, how do we message these products? Do we label them as vegan or vegetarian? Do people care about the environmental impact? What is the label going to look like? What does alternative seafood mean to consumers? Who is the target audience? Who's eating these products? And students will work on solving that challenge semester and provide real deliverables and solutions for the companies that they will actually implement into their organizations. And outside of our curriculum, we also host a series of online programming and events, well, online and also in person, but here are just a few examples of some of the online events that we've had within the alternative seafood space. You can see we've had Impact Food, Earth Week, we've had Umaro Foods, and the Seaweed Company come speak to our students. And this is an opportunity for students to get direct exposure to professionals, interact, talk to them, ask questions about their career paths, about the companies, what they're up to. Oops, I went back. Let me see. And finally, ways to get involved and our call to action. First and foremost, I'd love to encourage everyone here to consider replacing seafood with plant-based alternatives or cell-cultured alternatives in their diets if they haven't already. Since I adopted a plant-based diet over 20 years ago, the world of plant-based alternatives has expanded significantly. There are some incredible options out there. It's more accessible than it ever has been. When I first started eating plant-based, there was really nothing on the market, and it has come a long way. And I just think it's going to become more and more accessible, delicious, healthy. So I really encourage you all to try it, even if you're just swapping a few meals here and there. I really really encourage everyone here to do that. And I really believe that we have a collective responsibility to make sustainable choices for the future of our oceans and our planet, including preparing the next generation to solve these problems. And finally, Plant Futures exists to support you and to support this space overall. Whether you're a student looking for a career path or a professional wanting to connect to the next generation of talent, we're here to accelerate the transition to a plant-centered food system that's better for the people, better for animals, better for our planet, and for our oceans. So I encourage you all to sign up for our news work and programming if you want to join our community. Thank you so much, and thanks again for organizing this conference.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for that really wonderful presentation. I think that this focus on education is definitely a key piece of shaping the future of our food systems. And of course, none of us kind of knew what the harms in our food system were. We all got to it at some point because somebody educated us. And I also found really interesting the way you pair students with plant-based and alt meat companies. That's super exciting, and you're definitely bridging. It sounds like you're definitely bridging a huge gap there. So thank you so much. And next up, we have Dr. Rick Barrows.
Hey, thank you. Couple of very interesting presentations as well as yesterday. I wish I would have attended last year. I would have known more what to prepare for, but going to go a little bit more in depth. If you don't like harvesting fish from the sea to be consumed, then taking fish from the sea to put in aquaculture diets, in our opinion, is even worse. And that's been going on for a long time. But I need to provide a little bit of a historical perspective, and then I'll talk about plant-based diets for fish and the F3 program. But I'm often asked, why does aquaculture use fish meal and fish oil and fish diets? And it's for a couple of reasons, but let's do a little bit of a historical perspective. Fish meals, forage fish have been harvested from the ocean for over 100 years. In the 1950s, most of it was going into swine and poultry diets. In Australia, since Robin's talking from there, they were spraying the undercarriage of cars to prevent rust with fish oil, which is a really big waste of omega-3 fatty acids, long chain. 1960s, the salmon industry began in Norway using high fish meal and fish oil diets, 40 to 50% fish meal. And one of the reasons fish meal has been used, if you cram a lot of it in there, you can feed just about any species. Organ moist pellets were developed in the US about that time using high levels of fish meal, fish oil, vitamins, and then minerals in the binder. Research to replace fish meal has been ongoing for over 40 years now. It's more conservation focused instead of just because it's too expensive. My first funded research project out of grad school was replace alternative sources of protein to fish meal. And at that time, we were just looking at reduction because they thought it was too expensive. Now we've been looking at total replacement. The F3 group wants to take all marine ingredients out of aquaculture feeds. And we've gotten pushback over time saying that we're trying to turn lions into lambs, that you can't feed carnivorous fish a plant-based diet. And we're not trying to turn lions into lambs, we're trying to turn soybeans into meat by adding all the essential nutrients they need, because animals don't require ingredients, they require nutrients. So here's two formulas, a fish meal-based diet and a plant meal-based diet. The fish meal-based trout diet has about, this is probably a 15-year-old diet, has about 30% fish meal and only 12 ingredients, where you need an additional 7 ingredients, lysine, L-methionine, threonine, taurine, amino acids that are needed, along with minerals and also different vitamin premixes. So for a plant-based diet to work effectively in trout or any other species, you need to provide all the nutrients that fish meal has and that plant-based ingredients don't carry with it. Fish meal has been used for so long in aquaculture feeds because it basically makes nutritionists lazy and feed mills lazy. If you've got fish meal, then you don't have to worry about all these other supplements. And they say, okay, you can do it with trout. What about other species? Well, nutrition's nutrition. With the F3 group and with the Ag Research Service, we've demonstrated that carnivorous fish, both marine and freshwater, can be fed fish meal and fish oil free diets. And everybody says, well, then what are you going to replace fish meal with? Well, they're really, and ingredient suppliers always want to say we have a fish meal replacement. And I've heard that for a variety of different ingredients. And really the only ingredients that can replace fish meal on a one-to-one basis without supplementation are poultry meals. But you have to keep in mind that both poultry meals and fish meal are highly variable in nutrient content. So you have to really speak on averages here. But what the aquaculture industry needs, or what the earth needs, is more high quality protein sources. And we can use soy protein concentrate, corn proteins, DDGs usually come from corn in the US. Barley protein concentrate is a very interesting product, along with mixed nut meals, which are byproducts of the human food industry. Bacterial meals and insect meals are gathering a lot of interest and are getting scaled up into commercial scale. I'd love to go into each of those ingredients, but in 10 minutes, that's just not possible. But a new report's come out from Hatch Innovation discussing emergent protein-rich ingredients for aquaculture. And you can go to this website and download this report for free. Very detailed, very good report about these different protein sources. Fish meal and fish oil provide four things in an aquaculture diet or in a human diet: protein, energy, essential fatty acids, and micro ingredients. And while we have a lot of different protein ingredients that can replace the protein component of fish meal, there's really only one source of fish oil replacement, and that's DHA algae, or whole cell. At first, it was only whole cell availability. This is the algae that, this is the essential fatty acids, the heart and brain healthy fatty acids, DHA and EPA, that people eat salmon for. But salmon didn't produce it. The essential fatty acid is bioconcentrated up the food chain, and it's all coming from marine algae. So if we've already taken all the fish out of the ocean that we possibly can, and we should be taking much less, where's this essential fatty acid going to come from? We know we need it for human nutrition. Humans can elongate and desaturate to a point, but besides using the whole cell product, and I'll give you an example. This is a database. Robin was talking about bioavailability. This database has apparent digestibility coefficients, which is very similar. It's the amount of that nutrient expressed on a percentage level that can be extracted from these different algae and aquatic plants by rainbow trout. And if we zoom in on the schizoscytrin, this is the DHA algae, which is added to the diet for its essential fatty acid content, we see that the fat digestibility ranges from 39 to 89%. And we were feeding, there's an innovative trout farm in California has been feeding plant-based diets to rainbow trout and selling it into the high-end white tablecloth industry in San Francisco for about 15 years. And they're very focused on providing the same amount of DHA in the trout fillet as you get in the wild salmon. And we're feeding this number 59 algae here and have the right level of DHA. We switched to 58, and the DHA in the fillet went down by half. And so that's one problem with feeding whole cell algae, is the digestibility of the different sources can vary based upon strain of algae, processing technique. And so I want to highlight one company, Veramaris, that's developed a process to remove that digestibility problem and to supplement the world's population with more DHA and EPA without having to go to the ocean to get it. And they're using corn. They're located in Blair, Nebraska, the center of the US Corn Belt. They're using corn to produce dextrose. Take that dextrose, the protein goes other places in the corn. Ferment algae in these fermenters, these 4- and 5-story size fermenters, and then separate the oil from the cell wall, which goes to cattle feed. And then you've got an algae oil that can go to aquaculture pets or humans. Right now, they're producing about 10,000 tons per year. They're looking at doubling that production. And for every 1 ton of algae oil produced, that relates to about 66 tons of forage fish. So 10,000 tons of oil, that's 660,000 tons of forage fish that we didn't have to take out, or that we supplemented the world with DHA and EPA. And since our brains have a high concentration of that, with the deficiency, IQs can actually drop. So if we could supply more of these essential fatty acids to the human population, that would be a big benefit. And this is an example of small startups going full scale, and now it's in production scale. Pretty exciting. But on to the future of fish feed, we're focused on marine conservation through 3 initiatives. The first is the challenges. These are competitions with $100,000 to $200,000 prize money for whoever wins. The first one was just who could produce the most fish feed that had no fish meal or fish oil in it. And tilapia didn't win that. I knew tilapia would win because they don't have to have fish meal or fish oil, and that's been known in the research community. But a major portion of the world's tilapia production didn't know that, and the winner had a major impact in removing both fish meal and land-based proteins from tilapia diets. They don't need it, it just causes problems in the ponds, etc. We've also had a series of meetings where we put investors together with ingredient startups and along with feed manufacturers and researchers. And we also have a research program where the team asked me, well, if this can be done, how come nobody's doing it? So we've done demonstration projects where we feed F3 diets, fish meal and fish oil free diets on a commercial scale to demonstrate that it can be done. And another part of F3 is the Feed Innovation Network. That's f3fin.org. Here we try to bring together a lot of information that ingredient suppliers will need to know under evaluation here in order to get their ingredient into feed manufacturers. We list feed ingredient suppliers, companies that are producing fish meal and fish oil free feeds, sustainable retailers as well. There's an evaluation page that has a lot of information on how to conduct different studies and where you can go to get experimental feeds produced, that sort of information. The purpose of this website and this organization is to help people learn more and be less dependent upon marine harvested ingredients. And if we can do anything to help, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is such an absolutely important topic, and it just sounds like you're doing really, really fantastic work in this space. And I'm eager to see. I see we already have a few questions coming in, but I'm eager to see other questions we get on your presentation. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, our final panelist for the day, Taylor.
Thank you. And can you hear me okay? Perfect. Hi, everyone. So I'm Taylor and calling in from Rwanda. So my internet, it's a little stormy. So if my internet cuts out, please just let me know and I'll repeat myself. And thank you for sharing the slides. So I run a small organization called Tailored Food. We work on designing plant-based, nutritious, culturally relevant food products, primarily in the world's more complex economies. So a bit of a different type of presentation than the past presenters, but yeah, I really enjoyed just listening to the last 3 presenters and look forward to the rest of the conference. And Samantha, nice to see you again. And Rick, I have so many follow-up questions for you. So I'm going to be, I took some notes. I'm going to be following up with you if that's okay, because I was actually yesterday. sorry, I'll get into my presentation, but sorry, 2 days ago, I was actually on visiting East Africa's largest fish farm in my work with UNICEF, and where I'm pushing UNICEF to a plant-based future. But part of that is initially scoping out some of the largest industrialized animal agriculture projects in the countries I work in. Anyways, so Rick, yeah, lots of questions for you there. Rick, so thanks everyone for taking the time for me to share a little bit about the work I do. So going to the next slide, please. So I have a background, an academic background in food anthropology. It's always really fascinated me. Why do people eat what they eat? And I was living in Liberia in West Africa back in 2015 during the Ebola outbreak. And I had this one meeting. I was supposed to be working on something else, but I had this one meeting with this doctor, Dr. Jude, who worked for WHO, that honestly, like, kind of flipped a switch in my brain on the opportunity in the food space. Basically, that there was this like huge market demand, and the various charities out there were usually treating malnutrition once a child was sick, but we're not actually working on preventative solutions. And this was coupled with the fact that I was living in a community in Monrovia, Liberia, surrounded by neighbors who were living in extreme poverty, who were spending the majority of their income, around 60% of their income, on food, and whose kids were malnourished despite that. So this was like a really, really clear market failure to me. And so I began working on it, trying to ask the question of, is it possible to design nutritious plant-based food products, not just for upper class consumers, but for the lowest income consumers in the world? Next slide, please. And so the food landscape in a number of the countries that I work in, often looks like this, not that dissimilar from the US or Mexico or Canada, where I'm from, or some parts of Europe, where there's a lot of processed and packaged foods. And then there is a lot of animal source foods being consumed, but generally like the lowest quality animal source foods, processed hot dogs, processed very sugary dairy beverages, et cetera, et cetera. So next slide. And so our team at Tailored Food, we work across projects on with these 4 pillars being kind of our guiding light. Food should be radically nutritious, taste really, really good, be affordable to the lowest income consumers from day one, and be based on local value chains and sustainable local value chains. And that affordability piece is something that kind of differentiates the work we do from a lot of the other really exciting work across the alternative protein space. And I've worked over the years with Impossible Foods and Eat Just and many other stakeholders in the space. And I appreciate the kind of starting at the high end of the market and working your way down approach, which is what most companies generally take. But our approach is a bit different in that we believe when you start from day one trying to design for the lowest income consumer, you actually design a different product, design a different business model, and have to kind of be more creative from day one. And it's almost easier in a sense to start at the low end of the market and work your way up than the other way around. So that's something that distinguishes our model a little bit. So next slide, please. And so the 3 things we've learned over the course of doing this work for the last 8 years is that moms care a lot about health, and that selling food to the lowest income families around the world, it's really profitable. If you visit, most rural communities nowadays in the countries where we work, places like Haiti, Congo, Somalia, you'll find that the products from companies like Nestle, Unilever, Coca-Cola, they're available in rural communities everywhere. Food companies know that it's very profitable selling food to the lowest income families. And so the core thesis that we've seen play out time and time again in now the 31 countries where we operate is that it's not only possible, but it's actually profitable to sell really tasty, culturally relevant food to the lowest income families, and to do it all in a plant-based way. So that's kind of the core thesis that guides our work. Because the exciting thing, and I know I haven't talked a lot about plant-based food yet in my presentation, but the really exciting thing for us is that if you're prioritizing, again, those 4 pillars of nutrition, affordability, local, and taste, sorry. If you are truly prioritizing those 4 things, the data takes you to plant-based food products every time, we find. So next slide, please. And so here's some of the, and I'll talk more about like what our work actually looks like on the ground, but just for context, as mentioned, we work kind of across both the private sector and the development sector. So we work with stakeholders like Eat Just and Impossible, who want to design alternative protein products in complex economies. But we also work with the likes of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a variety of UN agencies, including the World Food Program and UNICEF, and then other stakeholders like DSM, Unilever. We designed a line of plant-based food products for Unilever in Ethiopia. So we're not, and we don't shy away from working with the big players. If there's an opportunity to do good work, we believe, these big companies in the space, in the food system space, at the end of the day, we'll try to create impact through those big companies as well. So now to briefly talk about what our actual work looks like on the ground, the most kind of interesting part. So yeah, we first and foremost do deep anthropological research in all the markets we work in. So I apologize, I'm a little loopy. I spent all day in rural communities in Rwanda today, interviewing low-income households and visiting some really incredible plant-based food companies. A really exciting sustainable mushroom company, and then a company that does like a whole variety of basically like powdered fruits and veg that then are turned into food products. Beets, carrots, plantains, onions, some fruit, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we first do deep anthropological research in whatever countries we're working in. Next slide. And then we take those research insights and work with grassroots local entrepreneurs to design really exciting, again, culturally relevant, tasty, nutritious, local food products that are plant-based. So again, we take kind of a different approach to other stakeholders. That product there was our fermented cassava-based porridge that's been sold now for 4 years across Liberia. We started that business during right after the Ebola outbreak, and now we started it, with 2 rooms of an abandoned half-built hotel. But now we're the biggest nutritious food company in Liberia, which is exciting. This picture here are 7 of the 160 women entrepreneurs in Congo. We built a completely decentralized food production model in Congo, taking a beautiful plant-based food recipe from Congo that's been around since the research we've seen. It's been around Congolese cuisine since about the 1850s or so. But it had never been commercially produced. So we took this product, improved the food safety a little bit, maintained the really amazing banana leaf sustainable packaging, and took to market a product with these 160 entrepreneurs that's effectively a Congolese style plant-based protein bar made with cassava, chili, peanut, and a number of other ingredients that are all local to Congo. Next slide. Yeah, if you click again, this is a quick little clip of this Congolese protein bar. Again, for anyone who's ever had a peanut butter flavored Cliff Bar, it kind of tastes like almost like a slightly tangier peanut butter Cliff Bar. So next slide. We design low-cost nut butters in countries like Mozambique, again doing it at a decentralized grassroots level, selling directly to low-income consumers, but also then nonprofit school lunch programs, et cetera, et cetera. And next slide. And in Cameroon, incredible, locally made, 100% locally sourced ingredient, super nutritious plant-based porridge. Again, leveraging beans for your protein source and getting to a really exciting nutrition profile with a combination of indigenous Cameroonian crops. So next slide. And then we take these nutritious products and at the end of the day, we market them no differently than Coca-Cola or Nestle would market food products. We organize football matches, TikTok influencers, hip hop concerts, all the same things that a big brand would do. We're doing those things to sell radically affordable, healthy food. Next slide. And the exciting thing is the Gates Foundation actually didn't believe that we were able to profitably sell healthy food to the lowest income people. So in an exciting way, because they didn't believe what we were doing, they thought it was too good to be true. So they funded a pretty detailed research study into our work to see if we were in fact doing what we said we were doing. So if anyone here is interested, please follow up with me and I can share the results of that study, which showed that in fact, yes, low-income people were purchasing the products we were producing in a profitable model. So thanks everyone for your time. We take a bit of a different approach to plant-based food. We work a lot in, I've mentioned a number of the coastal countries we work in. As mentioned, converting players like UNICEF from investing in fish farms to investing in these decentralized food production systems that are inherently plant-based. So if you're excited about anything we're doing, please reach out and we'd love to connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. That was great. And I think what I particularly love about the work that you're doing is how it's culturally appropriate and the foods are, tailored to the cultural context in which people would be purchasing them. I think that's so important for moving to kind of in the alt protein space to have cultural acceptability of the food. So thank you so much. And with that, we're done with our presentations and we can move on to Q&A, which is my favorite part of any panel. And so we can start with some of the audience questions and I'll go through them one by one. Dr. Rick, the first question is for you. What do you think are the main barriers to uptake of alternative feeds in the industry? Are they practical, economic, or attitude-based?
Yes, that's something we discuss a lot in the F3 group. A lot of it is farmers are resistant to change. When you take fish meal out of a diet, the color of the pellet changes. And so we found by adding other ingredients, we can keep the diet dark to keep the fish farmer happy. We're also working with consumer groups to put pressure on the fish farmers to adopt more of these alternative ingredients. That example of the trout farm that I mentioned is working very well because it's a select clientele. There's a lot of interest in fish feed now. I don't know where everybody was 30 years ago, but I can't believe how much the consumer is interested in what's being fed to their fish now. It's great to see.
Thank you. Taylor, there's a question for you. When you do your work in Rwanda for planting those particular plants, do you have problems with wildlife eating them? If so, does the government then give more money like the Netflix show, National Parks shows?
Yeah, thanks. And I haven't seen National Parks. I'm going to write that down to check it out. But in general, we both leverage cultivated crops as well as wild ingredients in the food products that we develop. So we try as much as possible to work kind of symbiotically with traditional farming practices, traditional cultivation practices, regenerative agriculture practices that, to be honest, were practiced in the countries we operate in long before regenerative is now became a new trendy thing. So generally, we operate it with communities who are pretty comfortable with their relationships with wildlife and have adopted good practices to kind of maintain a good relationship with wildlife over the years.
Thank you. I have a question for the panel more generally, so anybody can take it or everybody can take it. That would be great. What are the most significant challenges to scaling up plant-based or cell-based seafood alternatives? And how can the industry kind of overcome these challenges? I mean, because you're all doing such different kinds of work, what do you see as the most significant challenges?
Maybe I can talk from our perspective first, because we're building right now a production site and like trying to produce significant volumes, but significant volumes for us is nothing for the Nestlé's and Unilevers in the world. So food production is incredibly centralized and a very, very high volume and very, very low margin gain. So this is very difficult for small, younger companies to find a sustainable business model in there, because consumers always press you like it's too expensive. It's too, like for instance, for us, if we sell something for €2 to the supermarket, for the end consumer, it will be €4. So this is the kind of price pressure that you experience there. And so at the end, it all comes down to scale, I believe, and volume. And this is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because right now the demand is not so much there because the price is quite high, but the price can only go down with higher volumes. So I'm quite happy actually that very big companies are also in this game, like Nestle and Unilever, because they at the end have the money and they have the volumes to push this. Many people are skeptical of these kind of big corporations, but if they work towards the shared goal, then I think that's overall positive.
I might just add to that I think all the speakers today talked about the same problem from basically a different angle. And as Robin said earlier, I think all the solutions are needed. Yes, it would be great if we could be to just one thing right now, but it's going to take a transition. And thanks to the work Samantha's doing with education and innovation, and all those things have to come together. It's going to take some time, but at least we're working on it.
Can I also ask a question for Tyler for this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. Because I mean, rural Africa, it sounds incredibly hard to achieve price parity, which is why the Nestlé's in the world, like we were meeting with Nestlé recently, and they told us proudly in one of their broths that they sell in Africa, like it's an iron source and it's the biggest iron provider of the company, basically, or something like this. Like is that suitable for like smaller African companies to then even compete in this field, or is it like almost, I don't know, like impossible for them to beat these prices, let's say?
Yeah, so good question. And yeah, like there's certain countries we work in where like a more classic kind of global north version of food production makes sense, like a big factory with electricity and all of that. But we find like the really exciting thing about a number of the markets we work in is that the likes of Nestle and Unilever, their style of operating actually like isn't fit for purpose. That like it makes more economical sense to work off the grid. It makes more economical sense to use reusable packaging. It makes more economical sense to, have more employees and like less equipment, for example, because that's actually cheaper in a lot of the markets we work in. So we get excited because, yeah, if you really kind of are totally tapped into like the specific economic nuances of even like the particular regions of countries, then there is like really exciting economic opportunities to compete with the big guys. Yeah.
Thank you. Rick, there's another question for you. How can technology for alternative raw material for fish meal be available to developing countries? How much time will it take before such technology is readily available?
Well, I guess that depends on the ingredient and the processing technology you're talking about. I also really believe in local ingredients, because we really, on a worldwide scale, we can't produce more corn. There's just not enough arable land. But the mycoproteins I'm very excited about, and that doesn't take a lot of technology. Insect proteins, bacterial fermentation are pretty sophisticated, but partnering with an ongoing company would be a good way to get that started in a rural setting.
Thank you. Samantha, I have a question for you. What do you, in the work that you've been doing with Plant Futures, what do you think have been the most effective strategies when working with students to get them to kind of adopt a more plant-based lifestyle or to shift away from conventional seafood?
That's a great question, and it's a constant kind of experiment, learning, adapting for us. When taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, one thing we've learned, and there's a lot of data to support this, is that college is a very unique time in students' lives when they're living independently from their families' homes for the first time. They're starting to make their own food purchasing decisions, and there's interesting data that shows that the habits that students develop in college, they will carry for the rest of their lives. So there's a very important opportunity and window of time that if we don't take advantage and like teach students and make these options accessible, we're missing out on a huge opportunity. So we always kind of have that on our mind, and it's like, well, what does that mean? How do we best use our time or our work during these 4 years that students are in college? So I mean, for one of our strategies is how we message our work and what we're doing. We've intentionally have not identified as a vegan or vegetarian organization. We did a lot of research on the landscape, and we realized that a lot of kind of like vegan activism is usually more siloed into animal rights groups, but we really want to reach broader audiences. We want to reach more students from all backgrounds who are interested, whether it's climate, public health, animals, whatever it is. So we've really messaged ourselves as plant-centered and have been able to reach much larger audiences and groups of students for that. So that's something that we're always thinking about, very intentional about our messaging. Curriculum, of course, is innovating curriculum is a key part of what we do. So the applied learning part of the course is something that our students and the companies love because they're getting direct experience. It's not just theory, but they're actually practicing their skill sets. The multidisciplinary part of the curriculum has been very effective too, so that where students are breaking out of their silos. Public health students are working with business students, with data science students, because of course these problems are systemic by nature. And then food procurement is something that students are really excited about in the dining halls. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. So we've been developing more strategies around how to develop relationships with the dining halls so that we are making plant-based alternatives accessible in the dining halls. And oftentimes universities respond to students. They don't respond to outside entities or groups coming in and telling them, sell this product or will you buy this product? No, they're serving students. So that's who they want to hear from. So one of our strategies is empowering students to be the leaders, to be the change makers, to be the voices, to go talk with their dining halls. How do they work with sustainability directors and all of that? So just a few of some of our various strategies.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. Rick, there's another question for you. Is there work on the environmental impact of alternatives? That is, corn farming is not the best and soy is also not. So using these as a basis for algae may also be challenging.
Yeah, it would be great to have other feedstocks to put in there. There is work done on that. I think there's quite a bit of that life cycle analysis type work in that report that I mentioned by Hatch Blue. And Dr. Michael Telesti, part of the F3 group, that's his area expertise. So I pass off to him to answer questions of this one better than that one. I focus more on the nutritional aspects.
Thank you. This is kind of a more general question, and if anybody wants to take it. In Sweden, a new aquaculture site is in construction in which 2 million individuals will be killed every year. How can we get food system actors, policymakers, people in power of the world to come on board to steer us in a direction of where our food systems refrain from subjecting sentient beings to suffering and premature death when we have the opportunity and moral obligation not to?
I'll take a first stab at that question. It's a big question about like specific project, but I think it's like kind of core question that could, many case studies where that type of question is being asked. So similar to Plant Futures, we very much do not, if you go to our website, like we very much do not say we're a plant-based or vegan organization. We try to really work right in the mainstream food system with the biggest food system institutions. And we find that we've been able to shift investment in industrialized animal agriculture projects when we really focus on like the core pillars of affordability, cultural relevance, and nutrition. And when we make the argument across, like we don't mention animal welfare, we don't mention climate, like none of that. Like we stay really core to cultural relevance, affordability, and nutrition. And when you compare something like a new fish farm to culturally relevant, affordable, nutritious plant-based options that are available in food ecosystems around the world, generally the plant-based option always makes more logical sense for stakeholders to be investing in. That's kind of at least our approach inside kind of the world of like UNICEF or the World Bank.
Thank you. Robin, I have a question for you. What role do you think policymakers and lawmakers play in the adoption of, or in creating the environment that would encourage the adoption of alternative proteins, especially when kind of the private sector is working on these issues? How do you think policymakers can support you?
They play a massive role and they already shape it very much. So for instance, the taxation of these products, our products are higher taxed than, for instance, fish or meat products, at least in our region in Europe, but in most of Europe and probably possibly in the US as well, this is the case. Then also it's about incentives for what type of agricultural practices you want to support more. For instance, in the European Union, most of the funding of the European Union goes to agricultural subventions, and like it's the biggest lobbying groups also that they have there. It's a very political topic. So do you want to give more agricultural subsidies to, let's say, I don't know what, corn or bean farmers, or do you want to give more to like big industrial animal facilities? So all of these are at the end very political questions, and I think a lot can be done, but it's very hard to actually get people to. It's super unpopular, like very, very unpopular. Just some years ago, the Green Party in Germany wanted to introduce like that once a week in public institutions. It's like animal free, or like not even, but a veggie day, basically. They got punched down by the press and this and that. I mean, this is many years ago, but like it's still a very unpopular opinion, and I wonder a lot about what we can do, like as an industry or us as a company, to be less confrontational on these issues and a bit more showing people like, hey, there's beef and there's fish and stuff, but look, here's something new, and it just adds to diversity of choice. It adds to new types of products that also have their role there. So how you get this to a more inviting stage, I don't quite know yet. This is more a marketing communication thing, I believe, but policy-wise, a million things can be done, and they're almost all money related. Or sorry, one last thing, like the public institutions, they purchase a lot of food, a lot, for all kinds of public, whatever, kindergarten, schools. Like this is a massive leverage that you have. It's a lot of money that right now goes often to the cheapest chicken nuggets producer or whatever. Like, and there, for instance, you have a big leverage on like supporting the kind of food system that you want to see.
Thank you. Rick, there are a couple of questions asking you about sharing your thoughts about other alternatives. So there's one that says, could you share your thoughts about using fish trimming or carcass as an alternative to fish meal? There's also one that asked about your opinion on the future of insect protein as fish meal replacement, particularly as it has high AMP, which is also a huge problem with aquaculture.
Yeah, as far as trimming meal, that's been used a lot, currently used a lot, and it's a high quality nutritional product. Does that justify the depletion of wild fisheries? No, I don't think so. But if we've got a co-product, we might as well use it, because we're always looking at we're feeding more and more people every year. As far as insect proteins, a lot of the nutritional quality of insect proteins not only depends on the species you're talking about, which are primarily mealworms and black soldier flies, but it's what you feed them. They really reflect what they've been fed. And so that affects the inclusion level. 5 to 10% is no problem of the diet. I don't ever recommend going over 20% of any one ingredient for formulation security, in case you can't get that ingredient anymore. That's a pretty broad question, but hopefully I answered that.
There's also, sorry, a question about the pros and cons of bacterial feeds. So just getting all of those out of the way.
I'm sorry, pros and cons of what?
Bacterial feeds?
Oh, bacterial feed, you can get a lot of protein out of a acre of land. That's a pro. The cons are a lot of nucleic acids. That limits inclusion level. Too much nucleic acids cause a reduction in growth rate and feed efficiency and animal health. I wouldn't go over 10% of any of them. There, to me, bacterial proteins are more of a amino acid supplement, since they're 85% protein, rather than being a protein source themselves. So you can balance them with other ingredients.
Thank you. Samantha, could you share the references for the studies about changing long-term students' habits? I wonder if you want to kind of answer in chat or share your contact details, so participants can get in touch with you.
Yeah, of course. I could either drop them in the chat. I could do both. I can drop the references in my chat. Let me see if I can pull it up right now. And if not, I'll drop my email.
Awesome, great.
Give me just one.
Yeah. And Rick, there's a three-part question for you. How can researchers and R&D teams from companies or universities contribute and share information and practical experience with your team?
Yes, you can send it directly. One thing I didn't go into is, that the team's putting together right now, not me, it's a software solution called the Aquafeed Ingredient Research Engine, which we're hoping to get research on plant-based feeds and alternative ingredients and put it into this research engine so that you can look at the digestibility database for different ingredients, look at suppliers, rather than the database I suggested is just a Excel spreadsheet. It's rather clunky, but we hope to be launching that within the next 6 to 9 months.
Great. The second part of the question is, in fish feed formulation, the linear model or least cost feed formulation is commonly used. However, cost benefit analysis and non-linear models can be more powerful in optimizing feed formulations. Could you explain why these alternative methods were not applied in fish feed formulation?
Well, it depends if you're talking about on a research basis, on a commercial basis, and the commercial companies I've worked with that use least cost formulation, they have very tight restrictions on each ingredient. So let's say bacterial protein, you might put a minimum of 3% and a maximum of 5%. So is it really least cost formulation if you have such tight restrictions on species, land animal species, that they know a lot about the all the ingredients and the nutritional requirements of the animals? They can have much wider specifications. So I think every feed formulator, whether they're commercial or research, formulates on a different basis. I can't really explain why people do different things.
Thank you. Taylor, I had a question for you. You mentioned that you conduct anthropological research in communities as well. And so I was just curious, are there certain kinds of plant foods, or there certain kind of strategies? I mean, I know you generally mentioned factors, but have there been specific products or specific strategies that have worked better in terms of getting communities to accept alt protein food products or plant-based food products?
Yeah, so one of the, and it goes back to your comment you made after my presentation, one of the core things we try to do is really, as much as we can, shift the narrative that alternative protein products are somewhat of a new thing that is coming from largely like global north dominated organizations and countries. You know, for example, like TVP or texturized vegetable protein has been the primary staple protein source of consumers in Zambia for at least 70 years. But that's not seen as like a, you know, that's not seen as alternative protein because it doesn't come from a startup. It's just a common, affordable Zambian food product. Or when you look at tofu or tempeh around the world, and there's so many examples out there across Latin America, across Africa, and across Asia. And so first and foremost, we look at the communities we work in, including coastal communities, to understand what their food traditions were, often pre-colonization, and try to celebrate those food traditions. And those food traditions were often largely plant-based food traditions, not necessarily exclusively. I think to the Samantha's point and what some others have been saying, yes, maybe people, we're not 100% vegan, but people in the communities we operate in, primarily, historically speaking, ate plant-based diets, and then animal source foods, whether that's aquaculture source foods or land animal source foods, were often, a kind of type of food you eat during times of celebration. And we're more of a kind of a special treat rather than an everyday staple. So we try to, celebrate those everyday staples. And then again, the kind of to your question specifically, the tactic we try to focus on is really talking about looking at food history and really pointing to the fact that like the obsession with eating animals in daily consumption patterns was really an idea that was generally brought by like whatever the colonial power of the day was, and that to be pridefully, Pan-African or proudly Congolese or proudly Mexican is actually to resort back to a plant-based diet.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And one more question for you, Rick. Do you see a fish feed / processor industry-led initiative to promote feed or fish, which has fish meal alternate ingredients, just like MSC logo has done work on sustainable caught fish?
Yes, we're hoping it goes that way. And there is some progress working with different feed manufacturers that are working with ingredients and actually getting alternative ingredients put on the bag of the fish feed that is produced. So it is moving in that direction.
Thank you so much. And I think that's it for the questions. Thank you so much for being here. This was really wonderful and insightful. I definitely learned a lot. I know our audience definitely learned a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And with that, we're going to wrap up this session, and our next session is going to start at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you for attending.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.